The following is a production of the University of Minnesota, driven to discover.
Hi, this is David Arundale, your host for the Peer Assisted Learning Groups podcast. Thanks for spending some time with us today. This episode introduces us to Teresa, who is a doctoral student in the medical school at Drexel University in Pennsylvania. Teresa shares a variety of strategies that she uses to help her students succeed. She explains how she learns along with her students and puts herself in a position to be a resource to help the students to be able to discover the power that they have within them. Listen for her final statement, where she advocates that it is the display of empathy that can be the key to supporting students to be successful. This episode is the final one in a three-part series featuring the study group program at Drexel University in Pennsylvania. Let's listen in on our conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, tell us just a little bit about yourself. Do you have hobbies or campus activities that you're involved? What are you studying in college? And where do you think it might lead for future employment?
So I am a fourth-year PhD candidate in the microbiology and immunology program at Drexel Med, which is the College of Medicine at Drexel University. And I study innate immune responses to viral infection, particularly coronaviruses like SARS-CoV-2 and marine coronaviruses, and also flaviviruses like Zika virus, to look at the innate immune signaling pathway differences, especially in regards to the brain, because there's not a lot known about that particular area with viral infection, despite all the problems those viruses cause. For outside work I am a tutor. I tutor across the programs at my school. I do most of the biochemistry, cell biology, microbiology specific classes, including the pre-med program. I also am a peer academic coach, which is non-content based academic tutoring. And then I'm also a physician assistant group facilitator. So they have a study group for the physician assistant program, and I help facilitate those study group sessions for them, which is actually a lot of fun. It's a lot of acting out case studies, which is awesome. For fun, I like to bake. I stress bake a lot. And I also like to play with my dog. I have a 3-year-old American Staffordshire Terrier that I adopted last year. He's lovely and wonderful. You may hear him bark because he barks at everything. And so, yeah, I cook, I clean, I like to write fiction for fun, and do a lot of stuff on the side with that.
Well, you have a really rich life of things, and I imagine those all are really helpful to provide balance for you, particularly in this crazy time. For those who are listening to the podcast, we're still maybe towards the tail end of COVID, but we're interviewing an expert here. She might have a different opinion about all of that, so I defer to you. But just because some people listen to this podcast 3 or 4 years from now, and I just wanted to set the context for it. Well, well, you've mentioned all these kinds of ways that you do tutoring and facilitating and such. Well, in addition to the salary, which is always helpful to pay the bills, why did you decide to become so involved as a study group leader?
So I have actually a long history of tutoring. I used to privately tutor. I had my own little side business since 2006, mostly for writing, because that's what my original bachelor's degree is in a journalism degree from Arizona State. It really helped parlay into when I went into the STEM field, that I did really well in those classes, and all my professors were like, "Oh, you should tutor, because I see you working with the other students in your class and you're helping them pass the class. So you should get paid for this." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I just kind of fell into it, and I've actually been an adjunct faculty at a community college back home in Arizona. And then I also had a lot of fun doing the actual teaching aspect, but it also helps me differentiate between the tutoring aspect, which is not teaching, which a lot of people don't know that until they actually start either tutoring themselves or getting tutoring help. We use a lot of Socratic method, which is my go-to. I try to quiz the student if I figure out what they know already, and try to then help them build upon it by using leading questions to work them through a problem that might be something really difficult. Like say it's like, DNA replication. It's a difficult process to get through, as you can hear my dog bark, almost like clockwork. Those types of concepts are hard because there's so much, and it's a lot of different proteins and a lot of different pieces and parts all coming together to make a process happen. And so really helping the students break that down and build it back up into a framework that works, that they can now, when they see the molecules in like different perspectives in like papers or like in their lab settings, they're like, oh yeah, that's involved in that process. Okay. So it helps them a lot, I feel.
Did you ever do anything that looked like helping tutoring or helping other people whenever you were much younger, maybe going all the way back to elementary or secondary school?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I was definitely one of those kids in my class where the teachers would always be like, Teresa's really social. And it was more like I had friends in the class who were struggling with it. And I would be like, oh, just do it like this. This is way easier than what they're explaining how to do it, especially with math. Because I'm not a math person. I don't like math. And if I can find an easier way to do the math, I will do it. Just because like whatever makes it easiest is the best way, because that's why I'm a biologist. I'm not a math person. I would be an engineer if I was a math person.
Well, what I've been listening to here is you've been a professional tutor as a gig. You have done unpaid things. You've done paid tutoring, and it's just kind of part of your core, it sounds like, to do things that look like this.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It makes it's very rewarding to see like that light bulb turn on for someone. And I've tutored all different walks of life, like first generation students to students with disabilities to students with on the autism spectrum to older students who are coming back to school and they're like, I have no idea how to use a computer. And they don't know that like there's this amazing thing called YouTube, excuse me, that they can find all these amazing like animations of biological processes and things like that. And it's like, oh, let's show you one of those. And then they're like, oh my God. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a way to talk about the things I'm really passionate about, which is science and writing and all these different subjects, and then help parlay that so that the student knows that they can also do it and be energized by it, because science is really difficult, and these courses are very intimidating to even students who are really good and like don't need tutoring and don't feel like they like can do well on tests and everything, but like they're still intimidating because I like to call these types of courses drinking from the fire hose, because it's more volume of information in a short period of time. I always tell the students, I'm like, no, I've been where you are. I know how hard this is, and I'm here to help you, showing you the tools I use to survive and do well at the same time. And one of my favorite things to do with them is to teach them how to concept map. That's actually my favorite tool, because it teaches you relationships that you didn't know were there. And I always learn something new when I make a concept map.
Well, this is excellent. Let me turn this question just a little bit
Cool.
around and focus it really narrow on you. What do you get out of this experience? How are you personally benefiting? I hear you talking about you find it joyful to help other people to be successful. You've worked with lots of different kinds of students with different kinds of challenges. I hear that, and I know our listeners are hearing all of that. But I want to get into Teresa and what are you personally getting out of this experience of serving as a tutor in your current role, as well as your role in past years?
I think it's helped me with my communication skills, and it's also helped me like it's helped me allow myself to show how passionate I can be about something and not feel like I'm talking too much about it, or even just like improving how I communicate, because every student is different. No matter if they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, it doesn't matter. Every single student is absolutely unique and they all learn differently. and learn in, like, sometimes there'll be one particular learning style, or there'll be pieces of different learning styles. And so it's interesting to see that kind of diversity in just the population in general, and like from undergraduate level tutoring to now graduate level tutoring, it is slightly different, but the student diversity is still the same. And so being able to adapt myself and how I communicate to each person, I think is going to help me out, because I would like to either do, I'm kind of on the fence as to whether to do biopharma or government, because like working for like the NIH or the FDA, and being really heavily involved in getting good science out there to the public, and also the impact. The reason why I'm interested in biopharma is like the impact of it, because things like the COVID-19 vaccine are reaching millions of people, and it's because of research that has been done since the original SARS-1 outbreak. The reason why we were able to get the vaccine so quickly, because there was already vaccine targets for the first SARS virus, and so they were able to be like, oh, well, why don't we just attack the same thing but on this virus? And so it took about a decade's worth of time off of the table that they didn't need to do, which is amazing. And so that being able to impact and save lives is really why I went into research. But you have to also be able to communicate that to the general public whose tax dollars fund your work. And so, which is very important. I'm like a huge person for, yes, science funding needs to be there, because my PhD stipend is paid through an NIH grant. And so that is through American tax dollars. So thank you for paying your taxes. And so tutoring itself has helped me improve my communication skills and to be able to tailor my communication to each individual audience, and be able to adapt as I learn what that audience is like and what they need to be able to understand something. And I think that's just made me a more effective communicator overall.
Well, I want to finish with this. I have one more question for you. I want you to have a final word. And that final word would be, what would you want to say to the listeners, which is this podcast, which are composed of peer students, study leaders, managers of peer study programs, and then other educators who just are curious about this topic? What's a lesson that you've learned or a recommendation that you would have related to tutoring and study group programs?
I think our biggest strength as a community comes from our ability to have empathy, where we can, because we are servicing a population of students who want to succeed and maybe are struggling, even those that maybe aren't struggling but think they're struggling and struggle with like things like imposter syndrome and test anxiety, all really real problems that happen. And like I personally struggle with test anxiety myself, and I always tell my students that too, so that we can actually show them that they can actually succeed in their goals, and we want them to succeed, and we're in their corner. And so I think that's really our biggest strength, is that we are there to be supportive and help them as much as we can. And we may not have all the tools, our personal selves. And so I always recommend other tutors to my students. I'm like, hey, if I'm, maybe not what you need, here's some other tutors that I know who are really good, that do things slightly differently than I do, that you may love. And so if I'm not the one for you, no skin off my back, here's some amazing opportunities for you here. And a lot of my students end up staying with me because I do stuff like that. Because I know that the way I communicate isn't going to be absolutely perfect for every person. I try to widen it as much as possible. But I think our ability to show compassion and empathy towards our students, no matter what their situation is and no matter what their background is, I think is our biggest strength.